Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Senior Living 101, the final part of our three-part series. And today we will be addressing CCRCs and life care communities. So the transitions of CCRCs and life care communities are something that a lot of folks have some confusion about. So we want help you out and provide you with as much information as we can regarding those senior living options. Today, our panelists are Faith Mirabella from Wellesley Design, Lisa Sinney, Mosaic Design, Laura Busalacci, Brookdale Senior Living, Dale Miller, Daring by Design, and Alicia Jones of West End Interiors. I'm Phoebe Stein of Olive Presents, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you for joining us. As we start our conversation about CCRCs, I think the first thing that we really need to answer is, what is a CCRC? And to start us off, I'm going to ask Faith Mirabella to kind of give us a top line. What is a CCRC?
Thank you, Phoebe. So a CCRC, the abbreviation is for Continuing Care Retirement Community. So it's really a collection of some of the models we've been speaking about already through series 1 and 2. So really it's, we have independent living, assisted living, a memory care component, and then a skilled nursing facility or skilled nursing home component. And the idea is that you would start at one end at the independent living, and as the needs for more care increase as you get a little bit, as you age, you just be able to move to the next step. So that's basically what it is.
What do you mean by move to the next step? Do you stay in the same building? Do you have to move to another building? How does that work, moving to the next step?
They're typically on a campus. So they can be separate buildings that are connected. Sometimes they can be separate buildings. So, but really it's idea that it is one community that you belong to. So there are different design configurations in which we can see, and sometimes you can see some of the, here's a skilled nursing facility picture right here that we're seeing. And then the one before it was the independent living. And so you can see the whole campus sort of relates to one another. And then, but so you, in this campus, you actually have independent living, and then you would go and change and have a room in assisted living, which would be a little bit smaller, but you would have more care, more, scheduled meals, that
Right.
sort of thing. And then in skilled nursing, then you'd have even more care and help with, meds and
Right.
And those sort of things. So that's the basics. Sometimes you see some of them, I'm seeing some do independent living and kind of skipping over assisted living, and then having a nursing component, simply for the fact that people are aging in place so successfully that the IL sort of turns into an AL as a mixed community, and then they have the skilled nursing component. So we're seeing a lot of different models of this, but the idea is, you start at, one and you're set. You don't have to think about it anymore.
Right.
You don't have
It's
to.
kind of a one-stop shop, and
Yeah.
it helps you for planning purposes. In my world, that would be great. I know where I'm going. I know where I'm ending. There's also another term for this out there. Dale, can you share with us what the difference between the terminology CCRC and LCC is? And is that a new trend to be calling it instead a lifestyle care community? What's happening here?
So life care communities are simply CCRCs, but operating under a different type of contract. So there's one distinct difference, and that is, like standard CCRCs, a life care community offers a continuum of care to a resident for life. But residents who become financially unable to pay their monthly care fees are subsidized by the community, and so you could call that an LCC.
Oh, okay. Is everybody who participates in the LCC part of a subsidized situation?
Yes and no. It depends upon the community itself and the contract that you signed initially when you decided to move to the CCRC, or as we like to call it, a life care community.
Okay. Well, you bring up contract, and that's a question a lot of people have. They've heard about buy-ins, they've heard about having to put an extraordinary amount of money down so that they can live their lives through, whether it's independent living, assisted living, into memory care, or whatever the configuration is. Laura, can you tell us about the entrance fees and how that works, and maybe how it works specifically for Brookdale?
Sure. So the entrance fee communities, you have to put money down. Usually that comes when you sell your home. And depending on the size of the unit, the location dictates how much money you have to buy in for that unit and effectively own part of, that building, that space. And then there's CCRCs that are rentals as well. So depending on what type of program they have going on at that community will dictate. And then the cost can range anywhere from 100 grand all the way up to, as we heard the other day, over $1 million. So it just depends. Location.
Right. Well, are these CCRCs more like condos, and then the LCCs more like the rental option? How does one differentiate and kind of plan accordingly?
I think it's based on the owner group. So the lifestyle care community, we don't really have. It would be the entry fee CCRC or a rental CCRC is what Brookdale has.
I see. Well, I do think that that's always a big question for people. Not all people. Certainly some people don't think about that. But, I have heard before questions like, well, okay, you've paid this big fee and then the person living there dies. What happens to that money? Dale, do you have any insight on that?
I think so. When you decide that you want to move to a life care community or a CCRC, you sit down and you make your arrangements with the ownership group. And there are many different ways that you can make an arrangement depending upon how much money is necessary to move in, and also in the case of someone who has heirs, their children, their grandchildren, they like to make arrangements for those people. So it's a matter of what type of arrangement, what type of contract you might want to have. And if you want to leave part of your money after you're gone to your heirs, that's a consideration when you're establishing the contract. So it's based upon mathematical equations and the percentage that you'd like to leave for them. And of course, if you don't want to leave anything to anyone, then your fee would reflect that just as well.
So it's flexible. There's a plan for maybe everyone. Is that fair to say?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's talk about levels of care now that we've figured out what all of the alphabet soup means. Lisa, can you tell us, in a CCRC or an LCC, do both of those provide memory care as well? What can you expect in those insofar as care is concerned?
Most do. The reason being is it's everything from you being independent, where you could be living in a cottage, you don't even have to be in a connected building, all the way through assisted living, then skilled nursing if you need it. So let's say you have hip surgery. you might go into skilled nursing and then you go back to your cottage or into your independent living apartment. So most of them will also have short-term rehab and memory care. You just really want to make sure that you look at it and that it's a great memory care, because you know, the odds are that you or your spouse may need that. And there's some purpose-built memory cares and assisted living with memory cares that really do a fantastic job. So you want to make sure that they have the top technology and caregivers for that.
That makes sense. Well, what happens if you move into a CCRC and you're in independent living, and then you're doing well, but your spouse is not necessarily doing well, and maybe they now need memory care? How does that work, Dale?
Once you've established your contract and you both move in together, we'll assume that you're living together in one unit or apartment. If one person needs to move to another sphere of the CCRC, like move from independent living to assisted living or memory support, that can easily be done through the community. And one person can remain in one area, another in another area. And the only cost would be additional meals and maybe some very small charges for other things for the second person. So you're remaining in independent living, your spouse or your significant other is moving to assisted living, and there's a small charge for the differential in meals and small amenities. So it's really advantageous to move to a life care community or CCRC because you're both taken care of for the rest of your life, and you're not paying rent or a double maintenance fee each month.
You know, I think it sounds like it makes the most sense, but Laura, how many people actually take advantage of that? How many people go in as a couple, you know, from a percentage perspective? How many times do you
A lot.
see that as
I
opposed to?
think the majority that are in CCRCs start as couples.
That's really interesting.
I don't know what the exact percentage is, but lots of couples.
Okay. And I see a lot of head nodding, so that must be across the board. Okay, now we've kind of defined what a CCRC and an LCC is and how they operate. Let's get into design and talk about, you know, how it differs in the different areas of that community, from independent living to assisted living to memory care and beyond. So Lisa, can you kind of start us off with how interior design differs between these communities, and also maybe how they're the same?
Sure. So the photo that's up right now, the image, is a project that we did that was a large CCRC. And this is a little cafe bar. You probably in assisted living might not see bar stools. So you've got to deal with not only different areas of health and fitness, but also a lot more amenities. And as we flip through the slides, you'll probably see skilled nursing doesn't even look like skilled nursing in a CCRC necessarily. It looks much more, this is all skilled nursing and short-term rehab, much cooler and inviting.
Way prettier than any I've ever seen.
Way prettier. This is skilled nursing as well, kind of the family area and cafe. You're going to see pools. You're going to see, in this photo, you're seeing a nurse's station. It doesn't look like a nurse's station. It doesn't look very clinical. A lot of people do outdoor pools depending on the area, or indoor pools. We'll have cafes and different dining venues. This is a gorgeous, looks like this is Face Project.
Gardening, yes, gardening.
Gardening area. A lot of my projects have indoor gardens and outdoor gardens from everyone. So the amenity space is critical. This one is actually a Main Street theme. So we have a pub, we have a church, we have a 2-story theater, cafes and banks, ice cream parlors. So they can hold, if you imagine, sometimes this is part of it, almost like Las Vegas to a certain extent.
Kind of looks like Las Vegas with the fake sky.
Yeah, yeah, this one was actually featured on CNN because we actually did like a manhole cover and it had steam that came up through it and some really neat things. So
So I want to point out also, you're using the term amenities.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks are listening today and they're from the hospitality industry. And amenities mean something very different in hospitality than they do in the senior living communities. Can you go into that just a little bit for a moment?
Sure. So amenities, at least from my stance, might be a coffee shop or a bistro or a bar or a pub, a pool area. This is actually a rehab pool. This is just a gorgeous pool. So this one goes down into the ground. There might be, you're serving alcohol in some areas, depending on the community and where it's at. Golf courses could be an amenity. Craft shops. Here's a unbelievable theater that's fantastic. Part of it is CCRCs are generally larger fitness areas, so you can support a lot more of these types of services. When you're in an assisted living building only, or assisted and maybe memory care, you don't have quite the amount of folks to be able to support all the extras and the cool
Okay.
stuff.
Okay, well, that makes sense. You know, there's a perception of a CCRC that everything has to be connected, right? And we kind of touched on that a little bit before, talking about the different phases of care when people need different types of care. Alicia, can you talk about the actual physical buildings, you know, how they might be different if they're not connected, how you have a community all in one place?
Yes. It really depends on the campus itself and the footprint of the lot size that you have to work with to develop a CCRC. Larger footprinted areas may have separate buildings. Like Lisa had mentioned before, may have its separate cottages where independent living residents would reside, and then also an independent building. And then every building may be separate. But you also have numerous communities that are connected in some way. And that would be through your common spaces and extended corridors that lead maybe from the independent living to an assisted living. And then your entrances, for example, the skilled nursing building, it's going to have its own private and separate entrances that are easily accessible for people outside that's coming for short term.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's many different opportunities to do both. It's just how it's developed is and the size of the campus. Really.
How do you deal with it? I can see that in a suburban situation with kind of a sprawling, wonderful campus. How do you deal with that when you're in an urban environment? Because I know there's CCRCs in urban environments too.
Right. Well, and that's a very good question. And they are built up. So it's just a stacked community at that point. And you have your regulations and the codes that still have to be met with outdoor spaces. And for example, memory care needs to have an outdoor space. So it would just be a secure decking with an outdoor patio space to it. And the same with independent living and assisted living as well. But yes, it would be more of a stacked community. But then you can also have different towers. And again, you would just have connections through connected corridors and common spaces.
That makes sense. I am curious. We have a lot of communities, you know, we've looked at some beautiful design and the images that we're seeing now and what we've seen over the last many weeks, looking at independent living, assisted living, memory care. And we're seeing more hospitality look and feel to some of these communities. Laura, is this a good thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the biggest conversation, like we had in session 1 and in session 2, has to do with the appropriateness for the furniture and making sure that even though it's independent living and then going to the other care types, we still need to make sure that it's senior appropriate. So we have to take into account the size of the height, the depth, the firmness, the pitch of the back, arms, all of that comes into play. So I think when you're in a entrance fee community, the expectation is different. And, you know, usually the folks that are in those communities had businesses, had very high profile positions when they were in their career, and the expectation is different, whether it's different type of carpet. Some of the communities that we used to have, we would put wool carpet in there. I mean, so you have to know the clientele. If it's a new construction, you know, what's the expectation when that opens, and design accordingly.
Anybody else like to weigh in on that? I know that this is a big conversation today, and has been now for the last several years, with the hospitality kind of by merging with the senior living on the design pieces, and you see some of that crossover coming in.
Actually, Phoebe, there's one of the things when it's speaking to a group about how we design for senior living, a lot of the times it's this beautiful Venn diagram where we steal from hospitality, we steal some from healthcare, we steal some from residential, because we want it to feel like home, but we wanted these spaces to be, you know, they're special. So it's that hospitality. And then of course, then there's the healthcare part of that. It's got to be able to support people in a, you know, with the proper amenities and codes that, you know, happen with a level of care. So I think the hospitality, especially when we're talking about CCRCs, given where you are in that Venn diagram, you get to move around. If you're doing the independent living, you get to sneak more towards that hospitality side. And then of course, as you get to that nursing home side and the nursing care, then you're getting more towards that healthcare side. You want them all, you know, and you want to string it all together with it feeling like home. Yeah, so.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
I also think that, you know, on CCRCs, we often deal with the resident council.
Yep.
So that's not necessarily the case in assisted living or memory care. So the residents are heavily involved in the level in one area of the country, or even one building might be completely one way on how they want their furniture to look or their environment to look compared to another group.
That makes
One
sense.
of the things that we want to make sure is that there isn't a distinction that is up and in your face, to go from independent needs now memory care. It shouldn't look like a totally different care type. We need to make sure that we're cognitive of blending it so that it's supportive of the residents that are going to be in that environment, not looking like a totally different type of community.
So there's a continuity to the design so that it doesn't feel that it's more of a transition. It doesn't feel like they've gone to a new property.
Correct.
You know, we have a question from one of our viewers who says, from my seat, I never hear CCRCs anymore. Antiquated term, right? I don't hear about life care community. I hear more often about life plan community. Thoughts? Now, my thought is, wow, that's a lot of different things that are trying to say the same thing. And maybe as an industry, we have too many terms and need to pare it down a little bit. But if there's confusion out there, is a life plan community different than a CCRC or a life care community? Is one on the way out? Anyone?
Well, from my standpoint, I know that CCRCs, the word and the term, started to get a negative connotation because there were a couple providers that took people's deposits, but then didn't take care of the building. And so that happened. And that's not right, and that's illegal. And there are wonderful providers out there. But you know, Laura could probably speak to this better than I can, but that's the only thing that I know of that might, you know, why people don't talk about the term.
Yeah, it sounds all very similar, if not the same. It's just the owner that wants to put a different spin on it so that you don't have, kind of like nursing home is getting a really bad rap. So am I skilled? Am I rehab? You know,
Mhm.
life care, CCRC, anything that's talking about a continuum of care within a campus or in a high rise. Because if you have different levels within a high rise that has different care types in it, all the same conversation, it's probably owner specific.
You would think that maybe the way to go would be the continuum of care, because that's exactly what you're doing, right?
Well, the,
You can afford it.
right, and the prospects and residents moving in, it can be negative feeling because it is a moving into an area that you're now looking toward the end of your life.
Right.
And that's coming sooner than you may want. And it's so, I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Good point, Alicia. Good point. Because
But I think it's also,
go ahead, Phoebe or Faith.
Oh,
Sorry.
I think it's also sort of a peace of mind, though, that once you make this one move, the first move's the hardest. You know, when you're going from your home and there is that part where you need permission to get rid of certain things, you know, and to be able to downsize and think about a new lifestyle. And so I think there's the upside is that, well, if you only really have to do that once, and then the other moves are, you know, really kind of done for you and done in very micro moves, you know, for care, then I think that's a really good thing that works for, you know, the resident as well as families, because then they have peace of mind that they're taken care of, and as well as the fiscal factor we were talking about. If there was a pay-in at the beginning, that then they say, well, I'm you know, when I go, then they get the refund, they get the deposit back from the buy-in from the beginning of the CCRC. So I think there's a lot of good things about the CCRC that.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's not with your emotional piece. That's with your rational piece. But I think to Alicia's point, that is difficult. I know with my own mother, when she moved into independent living and she left her independence as she saw it, because it was the house of her selection, of her belongings, her design, etc. You know, there was a resolve, and it was not necessarily a positive one. It was like, here I am, now I'm waiting, you know, now I'm biding my time. And so there has to be a piece that also addresses that, I would think. Is that something that happens when people move into a CCRC? Is there typically that kind of a counseling that takes place to help people adjust and adapt?
I don't know if there's like a counseling per se. I know in speaking to a lot of residents in the CCRC communities and just asking questions, they wish they would have moved in sooner. That is the biggest regret, that across the board, if they would have known how nice it was, how much they didn't have to take care of, all the activities that they can participate in. COVID makes it a little different, but they would have done it 10 years earlier, you know? So the biggest referrals are from residents within the community. It's not from marketing or anything like that. It's all word of mouth. So usually you know somebody that's in there, which helps you navigate what you want to do and what you're comfortable participating in or not.
Maybe I've have at one of the grand openings, 2 best friends that both of their husbands passed, and they were living in different cities. One was in San Diego, the other one was in Cleveland, and they decided to go into it together in one room. And they loved the fact that they could travel and not have to worry about their house being broken into, or worrying about if the sink did something wrong. They could actually have a great life and then come back and live in a resort style amenity space. That's pretty fantastic. I think that's the thing, is you want to do this before you need to do this.
Right.
Exactly.
We have another question, and it's directly in this conversation. Have you noticed that most residents are okay with physically having to move from independent living residences to assisted living residences? Or would they prefer to just stay in their first residence and have that adapt to whatever needs of care are required? I think we touched on that a little bit in our first two sessions when we talked about independent living and assisted living, and you know, who makes that move over. But I think it bears answering again.
I'll take a stab at it. So if you're in a CCRC,
Mhm.
usually you will hire, if you need assistance, you're going to hire, most of the time, you're going to hire somebody to come and help you, whether that's, you know, a couple hours a day, a few times a week, and what have you. So, I mean, that's what I've seen in our communities is folks want to stay in the independent side for as long as possible. When it gets to be too much, then they will move to the assisted or the memory care. If their spouse is still around, the spouse will stay in that independent apartment, and the other spouse will be in the other area, and they'll meet for lunch or dinner or
Right.
hang out, go for walks and whatever.
Directed to you, Laura, is a question from James, who asks, is there an appropriate age range that you think is the optimum that folks are missing, generally speaking?
If they move in their 70s, people are moving in still in the low to mid 80s. I think we talked about this maybe last time. It was around 85 or 87. When I did some of those poking around at some of our communities, they wished, so they were in their 80s and they wished they would have moved in 10 years earlier.
I think that makes so much sense.
Right. I hear and see the same as well. And just I wanted to add this earlier. Operators are doing such a better job reaching out to the community and having community programs and events, and also renting out space within the community for different events for the local towns. And this, I think, is great for residents and people of that age to come and just see what it's like, and just get a feel and ease them into walking into an actual community, and just getting a feel of, oh, it is okay. It's fun. It's safe. You know,
It's less intimidating that way.
exactly.
We have cocktail hour. I mean, come on.
And there's always a good cocktail hour.
There's always a good cocktail hour.
We have a community. They were actually even highlighted on a local news, sort of feel good news cast, the Chronicle out here. And their cafe is open to the public. They have an art gallery that they rotate quarterly, and that's always open to the public. So, you know, everything, and those are kind of off the front door. So they're inviting the community in. We have another community that they share their pool. They put pool times in so the kids can come, and it's great because there's big storefront glass windows, and the cafe is there so people can, you know, sit and have a coffee and watch the kids scream and play and have a great time in the pool, you know, during those hours. So that's a great thing that, you know, I think that the CCRCs have got down, and I have seen it in other communities too, you know, even assisted livings, or if they do have something that they can share and offer to the community, that outreach is always great. Yeah.
It is. It's really a plus for everybody, the community at large and the community within. Let's turn our attention to technology, because, you know, we're all sitting here on a webinar on Zoom. Technology is the way we're living more now than ever before. And we thought we were technology focused before, but now it's at a new level. And we have our own technology guru. So Lisa, can you talk about how technologies are impacting CCRCs and what makes technology more important today?
One of the things is connection, and there are lots of connected tools. Everyone saw that during COVID with telemedicine, but we'll even do viewing rooms where it's a whole big screen and your whole family can be there and they can view you, and it's private, so it's not in your room. You have the right sound system, so it's easy to be able to talk and see your grandkids and really enjoy each other, maybe even watch a movie together. But there's also apps. Connected Living has one where you're connecting with other residents, and you might find out that, you have a love of a certain hobby. And you want to meet and do it together. There's a lot of that that's going on and is fantastic. So you're able to actually get your own groups instead of having the CCRC or the owner kind of determine, well, it's bingo night. No, it might not be bingo night. It might be whiskey night, and you're trying out a flight of whiskey, or a flight of beer or wine or whatever your pleasure. The other thing is we're putting in 3D printers and some other technology so that you can actually, when design something, upload it and then print it out. There are so many crafters and entrepreneurs, and it's a lot safer than a buzzsaw. So,
I'm going to ask the question that, of course, comes to my mind, because my mother, although she was very sharp on pretty much every platform, but not technology, would say the machine is doing this, or the machine isn't doing that, or it's not connecting, because it was never something that was the person doing it was always the machine doing it wrong. So you've got an entire community of 80 plus people, and a lot of them are like my mother. So how do you get those folks on board with the technologies that can make their lives better?
So no one gets on board with the technology unless the value of the technology is more than the pain of learning it. That's why people don't like to get new phones in general until they have to get a new phone. You don't want to get a new computer until you have to get a new computer. What we often don't do is find something that is of, like my dad would have never got an iPhone unless he could have gotten ESPN scores. And I asked him, I'm like, why did you actually started using the iPhone and texting? He's like, well, it was the football scores. And then he started connecting with my brothers on that. And then his brothers. So
Right.
that's something. The other thing is we forget this is the generation of instructions. They read the owner's manual. My kids don't read the owner's manual. So we kind of tell them, we instruct them and tell them how to do it, or figure they're going to figure it out, and then we let it alone. Well, you need that laminated, easy 1, 2, 3 steps with pictures on it every single time.
Right.
And then it makes it a lot more helpful. But when you're connecting people and they feel like they're seen and they can find their own tribe, or they can get information that they want, that jump is very easy.
Lisa, aren't the apps and stuff, when you have a iPad, you can really simplify the stuff that's on the screen, right?
100%. 100%. You can even simplify the TV to make sure that, it automatically comes up with video chat when I call my daughter. So you can do those types of things. You can do skills on the Amazon Alexa that might remind somebody to take their medication. So, my mom has a very good relationship with Alexa. Alexa tells her a joke. She says what the weather is. She, will tell what the news are. And then she even does her grocery list. So, those types of things, it's a little bit like GPS. Can you imagine driving without GPS now? No. But at the very beginning, you're just like, what is it? I don't understand it. It's telling me that, it takes a little bit to get used to, but then you can't think of life without it.
Do you think that most communities have somebody who can provide technical assistance to residents?
I'm finding a lot more are, and it's also a multi-generational activity to have students, and you can do it even through Zoom, but to have students educate their senior partners on how to do different technologies. And there's a lot of videos out there as well. And then the seniors can educate them on real life stories of what was it like, this would be my grandparents, but living through the Depression, or having five brothers in the war at one time, like real life, not reading it in a history book.
Right.
So really talking about the 60s and Woodstock. And those types of things. The kids crave that, and they feel good about being able to teach technology.
Yes, yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. And they're better at it. They're
Yeah.
just better at it. I tried to teach my mother, she said, send over her grandson. You know, he had more patience and he was able to get her on board with it. I was not the winner on that one.
No, it's a little bit like teaching somebody to drive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do we think? We've talked about a lot of elements of the CCRCs, the life care communities. Dale, what do you think the greatest advantage is? I'm going to ask every single person, what's the greatest advantage of a CCRC?
Think of it as summer camp for adults.
Okay. Great.
And it really is. And when you think about the fact that as people age, they may become a little bit more isolated, or a good deal more isolated than they were in their younger years. And so the tremendous advantage is being the socialization, being able to be with other people and to enjoy the activities that you personally like. And most communities offer such an abundance of activities that it really becomes summer camp for adults. And many people think about the fact that they should have done it much earlier, as we've discussed previously in this conversation. So if people were to move to a CCRC in their 70s, I think they would have a more comfortable life with far less things to worry about. Just write a couple of checks or make a couple of deposits or debits from your account. And other than that, everything else is taken care of. Your food is taken care of. Your amenities are there. Your laundry is done. Your home is clean. So you have all that time to just enjoy yourself. And that's why it is summer camp for adults.
Love it. Alicia, what do you think the greatest advantage is?
Well, I have to second what Dale says, but I think the safety and just feeling the comfort, as we've mentioned before, is such a refreshing feeling. That one step of being maybe from your children, of being asked to move into an independent living, and maybe mentally you're not quite there yet, but you're in there. Just the feeling of a community, a real community of people and friends, and just feeling the safety of being able to move.
You froze. I'm sorry. Laura, can you say the greatest advantage, please? I don't want to override Alicia, but
into
I'm
the
not
next
hearing
phases
her
of your
anymore.
life, and just feel like that you're being taken care of.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Laura, next up. Greatest advantage.
Peace of mind. Short and sweet. Peace of mind. Third Dale and Alicia. Sum it up. It's peace of mind.
Lisa.
I third, fourth, fifth that, but I also think it's flexibility. Being able to go off and still go on a cruise and, go to Rome and then come back and not have to worry about anything, and you just slide right back into your life.
Yep.
Faith.
I think their greatest advantage is their economy of scale. I mean, you're talking about amenities, and I remember when you're brainstorming about all the amenities that they can have. And I remember Laura being adamant, like, we can't have just one dining. No, we've got, we have a cafe, and you have a bistro, and you have a formal dining, and you have an outdoor dining, and you've got a garden dining, and you've got barbecue, and you've got so there's always food. And then we have full on performing arts centers, fitness centers that'll just make you cry. They look like they're collegiate. Pools, spas, and actually spas where you've got massage therapy, salons that'll just, you feel like you're in paradise. So because you're able to kind of pool that among all sort of these, communities that when they're separate, maybe not be able to do it, but when you've got this, this grand campus, you can really offer a lot. And then that does allow for flexibility. that maximizes your social ability, because you're going to find people who like to do what you like to do because you're off doing whatever you like to do out of all of those choices. And it's done in a very safe manner. Everything we design and everything we do and offer and what the staff offers is well thought out. So I think that's kind of
I
how
think that's a great point, that you don't have to worry whether or not you're going to be safe in the environment. That has all been thought through for everybody.
Right.
And I think you don't have to have coats and you know, umbrellas and boots, and that sounds pretty awesome. Now we're going to ask something a little bit more maybe tricky, certainly relevant to what we're all experiencing this year. Faith, how have CCRCs done during COVID?
Actually, they've done really well. Part of it is that economy of scale, because they were able to, when they needed to maybe have staff more available to be able to support on the nursing side, when there was additional staff, because you've had people who maybe had to mask up in PPE, and that was time consuming, and maybe how the nursing had to make 4 different quadrants in the nursing, where you're going from pre-COVID, COVID people, post-COVID, and people who are, you know, rehab. So that you're able to kind of take that and maximize and use it where you need to, because at the IL, on the IL side, a lot of the dining rooms closed down, which was good, but they were able to also negotiate really good you know, like grocery service, because if they weren't doing meals and plating that and putting it on the table, people were able to put together a grocery list. So they partnered with the local, you know, farm, and they would then be able to gather all the food, bundle it up for everybody, and deliver it to their door. Or if they were doing, they would also be able to do the, you know, an IL, the food service menu for the week, and people could check that off. So they had, you know, kind of room service and groceries.
Sure.
So you needed less sort of staff on the ground on the service way, but that was a really good way to sort of do that, and then be able to dedicate those people to those areas for that while, you know, especially
Right. Well, you know,
everything out.
I mean, in the media, certainly, you know, they took the worst case scenario, and I think it gave the segment as a whole a bit of a black eye, right?
Yeah,
Because they were only showing the cases where it was terrible, not where it was being done well.
right.
I'm going to ask each of you to tell me an element where it was done well and how it contributed to that positive outcome, because as a whole, it had more positive than negative. Alicia, I'm going to start with you.
Phoebe, my screen froze. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can hear you
Bad
now.
connection.
Oh, okay. Should we move forward? I'll move on to Laura, and let's see if you unfreeze. Laura?
Okay, ask me the question again, Phoebe, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just asking for other factors that contributed to the positive outcome in communities during the height of COVID and as we continue to deal with COVID and possibly around too.
People got extremely creative as far as activities and pulling. People would come and be outside and play musical instruments, and they'd have their own concert.
Wow.
People got creative with doing happy birthday, whether they were drive-bys or, you know, you saw on the news, gentlemen getting a bucket and going up to the upper floor where his mom's 100th or 90th birthday. I mean, people got creative. You had to get creative. So seeing all those different opportunities that were created differently, but still engaging,
Right.
was really heartwarming.
That's really cool. Dale, did you see anything that was, you know, a little bit different and that was a major contribution to the positive outcome for communities during the height of COVID?
Yes, and that has to do with good health and safety, about health, taking people's temperatures when they're entering the building. giving them a questionnaire to fill in and sign, where you're actually stating whether you've been on an airplane, whether you've been in contact with someone who has COVID or has had COVID, and the stringent measures to keep people healthy by having dispensers all around the community where you can get some gel and use it for your hands and feel as if you're protected, and the requirement for masks for anyone who's leaving their apartment. And I think it's been a tremendous help. And communities here in Florida, when they adhere to that, there have been very few cases of COVID when they take all of those measures into consideration.
Thank you. Lisa?
We've seen not only a huge amount of so people doing Zooms and scheduled calls, and having the caregivers help the resident and customer with their families so that it goes smooth, and actually arranging it, because everybody thinks it's just so easy, but if the other person's not there or happens to be in the bathroom or whatever, it doesn't really work. So from doing that to then providing a room space that the family comes in off the side of the building, and then all the technology is there and the residents on the other side and can really see the baby and not have to worry about the weather. And then little things like, I was talking to someone, and Bob had his favorite pizza that he wasn't able to go out and get, and they went and got it for him. Little things like that really make a difference. And
Right.
I do think that caregivers and the staff are the warriors here. They just wanted so much for everyone to feel good,
And to be
while
safe.
they were in there, and to be safe. And so, some of them even slept in the locations and moved in because they didn't want to have to go back and forth and potentially bring something
Amazing.
from their family into the home.
Right. Wow. So I think that we can all agree CCRCs are pretty relevant. I had a question about its relevancy. Alicia, I don't know, can you join us, or are you still frozen?
Yes, no, I did hear the question finally.
Okay.
I think what I've seen occur is there's been such a wonderful sense of being taken care of, more so. The communities and the staff have really pulled together to create these environments, to help make the residents feel very comfortable and safe and secure. And again, what everyone has mentioned already, just going the extra mile, I feel like has brought communities and the residents closer together in more of a family-like way, instead of residents living there separately and enjoying their dinners and things of that nature and different amenities. I think they've been able to really feel like a sense of family, and everyone there, everyone's scared, and everyone is there to help ease some of the nervousness about what everyone's facing with this pandemic.
And we're almost out of time, so I want to ask this amazing panel, is there anything else you'd like to add about CCRCs? Anything?
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Your last, I think COVID has now exposed how much caregivers and senior living community staff do. I think there's a much heightened appreciation, and that it's not just a job. I mean, they really, in order to do that work, to have the heart and the passion for it.
It is. It's a calling. And people in there, I've talked to, I actually, through this whole COVID, my niece has switched her major to gerontology. She, she just has a heart for it. And that's a beautiful thing.
Right. I think it's really shown the best of people. And, it's nice to kind of highlight that and give shout outs to people who are going the extra mile. And on that note, I thank all of you for going the extra mile and helping to give our viewers information that is critical to making decisions, and also information that gives them some additional thought into the process and what's available out there. As always, our webinars are available online at the Ageless Living Collaborative website, which is agelesslivingcollaborative.org, and it will probably be up in the next day or so. We also have there a gallery of images of various types of senior living communities, from independent living, assisted living, memory care, and the CCRCs. And we are building a glossary. I think it's really important that you understand what all of the alphabet soup is. And so we're all contributing to fill that glossary so people understand the terminology if they are either looking to get involved in this important segment, or if they're looking for a relative's next home. So thank you all, and we appreciate everybody being with us today. You can always ask a question on the website, and we'll have one of our Ageless Living Collaborative industry leaders help to answer that question. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.